I try not to be hot take guy on this show, but I have to get this off my chest. The Minnesota Vikings are frauds, and the Packers are going to beat them on Sunday.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Lily Zhao on the show today for Zhao You Doing. We're going to have a lot of fun with her. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at the Ultimate Football GM. It is taking your experience and putting it to good use as a football GM in an all-new app that you're going to love to play. And Locked On Packers listeners can get a 100% free boost on their franchise using the promo code Locked On. So, look, I've taken some heat the last couple days because I have been saying some things about the Minnesota Vikings that Minnesota Vikings fans don't like. And what I have been saying are merely facts. This is the thing that is always funny to me. They get so mad when all I'm doing is providing data. I am providing evidence for my claims, and the evidence that they're offering is essentially vibes. It's, oh, well, they're winning. You cannot point to any underlying data, okay, of the quality of the Minnesota Vikings. You cannot point to any. There is nothing to point to. They give up more yards than they produce. They are a below average team in almost every meaningful metric. And they have set an NFL record winning close games. That is not a skill. That is borrowed time. That is luck. And for the Packers, they can take advantage of this because there is evidence, plenty of it, that by a lot of these metrics, the Packers are already a better team. And this was, I couldn't fully say this a couple weeks ago when they were, 5-8 or 4-8 or whatever it was. But the underlying metrics supported the claims. Let me just give you some of these examples now that the Packers are in the position that they are in. Football Outsiders has a metric that they call estimated wins. And it is based on what is called the Forrest Index that emphasizes consistency, uses DVOA, so adjusting for opponent, red zone defense, first quarter offense, second half performance when the score is close, all of these things that are predictive when trying to understand a team's quality. So the Minnesota Vikings have 6 estimated wins based on Football Outsiders metric, which means we would expect, given their play in and play out consistency, given the way that they have played in high leverage moments, given the way that in the aggregate they have played, we would expect that they would have 6 wins. Every team that has in real life 10 or more wins has at least 10 estimated wins, which means the Vikings are at least 4 estimated wins behind all of those teams. In other words, they do not perform like a top team. They do not perform like a 12-3 team. They have not over the course of the season. Historically, they're not. They're 11-0 in close games. They've already set an NFL record for close game wins. This is a team that has consistently gotten crazy lucky in close games. The Packers, by the way, have 7 estimated wins, more. And guess what? They're 7-8. They have not had the same sort of luck. Now, every team needs a little bit of luck, but as I said, every team that has 10 or more wins also has 10 or more estimated wins. They are all good teams the Minnesota Vikings are not. Now, that's not proof that they're going to win on Sunday. But I'm telling you, this team is fraudulent. They are fraudulent. Let's dig into some of these numbers. These are numbers that if you're a longtime listener of the show, so if you're a Vikings fan and you just parachuted in here because you saw that I was talking about this, because man, Vikings fans are easy to rile up and they love to jump in my mentions. But if you're here, welcome. Thank you. Welcome to Locked On Packers. These are stats that I have a long running affinity for. So this is not just me cherry picking stats to be a jerk about intentionally. I care about DVOA. I care about EPA per play. I care about success rate and yards per play and yards per drive and points per drive. These are stats that I was championing when the Packers were good at them. So clearly, I think they are useful. I can't champion them when it suits me and then subvert them when it doesn't, right? Okay? Offensively, here are the Vikings. 17th in EPA per play, below average. 19th in DVOA, below average. 14th in success rate, bang on average. 18th in yards per play, below average. 17th in yards per drive, and 13th in points per drive. That is all adds up to a below average offense. Here's the defense. Even worse. 14th in EPA per play, average. 22nd in DVOA, so adjusting for schedule, below average. 26th in success rate, actively bad. 31st in yards per play, atrocious, bottom 2. 23 in yards per drive, and 18th in points per drive. They're a below average defense. Only the Lions, who just gave up Texas with a $sign yardage on the ground to the Carolina Panthers, who just got lit up by Sam Darnold and Chuba Hubbard. Only the Lions give up more yards per game than the Minnesota Vikings. This is not some sort of... They're significantly worse than the 2019 Packers. Look at any of the numbers, by the way. Vikings fans like to bring up the 2015 Carolina Panthers. They won some close games. Significantly better by every underlying metric than the Minnesota Vikings are this year. They are a historic, anomalous outlier. Statistically speaking, they are as fraudulent as we have seen in modern football. That's how fake this Vikings record is. That's how fake this Vikings team is. Now, is all of this evidence that Green Bay is going to beat them? No, it's not. Because in week 1, the Vikings did beat the Packers. And it was a game where the Packers played undisciplined and they lost track of Justin Jefferson a handful of times, and that was really bad in the offense. Did not execute well. Christian Watson drops a touchdown. A.J. Dillon couldn't get in at the goal line. They blow a 4th and 1 at the goal line. They have a turnover in the red zone. That game was a lot closer than the final score indicated. A 2-score game where you give away 2 good scoring opportunities, well, 2 great scoring opportunities and another good scoring opportunity. It's the only game this season, by the way, the Minnesota Vikings have won by more than 1 score. And it was, 3 months ago? The Packers are playing better. In fact, over the last 5 weeks, they have the number 1 passing defense by DVOA, the number 1 passing defense, a top 5 offense, and a top 10 special teams. Keyshawn Nixon, according to Aaron Rodgers on Pat McAfee, looks like he's going to have a chance to play. Aaron Rodgers said he saw him feeling good. He also said David Bakhtiari is trending towards having a chance to play, expects him to practice this week. We'll find out today if that is in fact the case. You'd love to have David Bakhtiari out there. We'll see if Yosh Nijman can go. If he can't, you have Zach Tom. And you feel much better about that going against Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, because the only way the Packers offense is not going to put up hella yards on this Vikings defense is if the pass rush just spoils everything. You get David Bakhtiari back. If the Packers come in relatively healthy, Keyshawn Nixon, Christian Watson, and David Bakhtiari, either Christian Watson or either David Bakhtiari or Yosh Nijman, you can put up plenty of points on this team. And no one loves to go down early more than the Minnesota Vikings. So you start hot. The Packers have been doing that much better of late. Although, of course, they went down early to the Dolphins. But the offense has been doing better early in these games. So, as I mentioned, if you look at all those numbers that I just cited, EPA per play, DVOA, yards per drive, all that stuff, the Packers are better offensively and defensively than the Minnesota Vikings in all of those categories. All of the underlying metrics say Green Bay is better. It's why they're 3.5-point favorites at home against a 12-3 team, whereas the Packers are 7-8. That's why. Because all of the underlying numbers says Green Bay is better. And that's because it's not really about Green Bay's quality or not. It's because the Vikings, I hate to break it to them, frauds. Paper tiger, not even paper tigers, because all the underlying numbers say that they're just not very good. Today's episode brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of the team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft and all the ups and downs of the season. You can control everything from who the lead scout is. If they're not very good, you can replace them. Managing ticket prices, managing revenue, all that stuff. So you can have a little bit lighter burden trying to pay all these players. And just for being a Locked On Packers listener, you can get a 100% free boost to your franchise when you use the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com to look it up, or in the App Store, that's ultimate-gm.com. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reaction game recaps and Locked On's take of the day. I host it. Come hang out. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Keyshawn Nixon was this close to getting the Lily Zhao Christmas present. She predicted it on the show last week that was, but didn't predict, but said, if I could give the Packers a Christmas present, it would be a big Keyshawn Nixon touchdown return. It almost happened, Lily Zhao from Fox 6 in Milwaukee. And then, of course, the Packers did not cash it in with a touchdown, but they did get a win, 26-20. Their playoff hopes still alive. And so, coming into the game and now coming out of it, how has your perception of Green Bay changed, if at all, based on what we saw in this game?
Peter, doing great. Merry Christmas. Happy
Merry
holidays,
Christmas.
everybody. Great holiday season. The Packers had a phenomenal Christmas weekend. And I will say my perception has changed. And, I think Keyshawn Nixon is a big part of that. And it's unfortunate. He's been dealing with a groin injury, and hopefully he'll be back soon. But again, if you had told me even last week that this would be if the Packers literally went out, there is a very, very good chance they're in the postseason. If you told me this last week, I would say, I don't know if that can happen. But this team is resilient. They've found ways to win. I think the offense, again, still has not, hit their ceiling, and it's just unfortunate with their injuries. But I am encouraged by what I've seen so far.
Yeah, how could you not be? Really? I mean, they've been quite good. And I want to ask you about this. So there was and we talked about this early in the season. We talked about it last year. This perception among some people that if you punch Green Bay in the mouth, they will not punch back. They will stay down on the mat. Two of the last 3 weeks, they've gone down double digits and come back to win. Now, okay, against Chicago, that's one thing. But now to do it on the road against a team fighting for their playoff lives in the AFC, I think we have to start putting that to bed, don't we? Doesn't this have to change at some point? If they keep doing this, then we have to talk about them differently.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I agree. And when you're looking at how they responded, I think that Jared Reed fumble and that recovery, huge, because you're talking about a 27-10 lead, all the momentum, all of a sudden it's 20-13 at the half. I think that was a big turning point for this team. Again, they talked about getting ripped into at a halftime by Jared Gray. That helped the defense kind of light a fire under their butts, and they played so much better. But like you mentioned, Peter, they have been resilient. They have been able to bounce back because in those losses, it's always been the opponent scores and the Packers team just kind of wilts. But that is not the case now. And I don't think that'll be the case moving forward because considering, they know they have to win the next two, they're going to be very, very motivated at home. It's going to be fun.
I think part of it, and I mentioned this on the show on Monday, that a lot of this was just sort of our confirmation bias. Like we had this perception that they did this. And so anytime it happened, we were like, okay, cool. And we forgot about all the other times where it didn't happen, that it was more just the kind of thing where they just weren't playing complementary football. So yeah, when the offense went 3 and out, of course the defense gave up a touchdown because I don't know, the defense has given up a lot of touchdowns this year. And so it wasn't that out of character for them. Now they're playing better complementary football. And that, in this case, also means special teams, although the fake punt was not the best. So we talked about this on The Leap, Jason Hirschhorn and I, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, about Rich Bisaccia and how much credit he gets for Keyshawn Nixon doing everything that Keyshawn Nixon has done since he's been around here. How do you view that? Like, do you think more of the oh my God, how is Amari Rodgers out there for as long as he was? Are you going, okay, this is actually a real credit to Bisaccia? Or like how do you view it? Because I think it's tricky.
It is certainly tricky. I think we talked about it last week, right? Like you're not doing special teams full force at practice. So it is hard to evaluate, hey, this guy's going to be our key returner. But I think when they put Keyshawn Nixon back in there, because they brought him in, as a backup at corner, but also for his special teams, savvy. And so I think when he got a chance to do it, Rich Bisaccia was like, ding, ding, this could be the guy. And luckily they've been able to capitalize off Keyshawn. But I will say, I think it was at the Rams game where Keyshawn had that really long return. You see Rich just running down the sideline, like right kind of like parallel to him. I mean, He's excited about his guys. I think they played very well, outside of the fake punt. But it has been such a revelation, I would say, because, again, the Packers really haven't had a guy at that position that has been this electric in a long time.
In a long time. In a long time. It was hard for me to go back and figure out when the last time I was like, was it Micah Hyde as a punt returner? Was it Will Blackman as a punt returner? Like, do we have to go back to Allen Rossum and Roel Preston? That's like 20 years now. Like, yeah, not great. So here's an interesting one, maybe just to me. So the Packers had 3 key players that they lost to injury in this game that all, ended up mattering to various degrees. Keyshawn Nixon, Christian Watson, and Yosh Nijman. In a vacuum, which one do you think is most important to this team? Because now Nixon is this spark on the kicks and is your nickel corner. And then, of course, the other guys are starters for you right now. So which would be the most detrimental moving forward to not have, do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question. If the answer can't be all of them.
Right. You'd like to have all of them. That would be ideal. Yes, please.
I would say potentially Yosh Nijman because, Royce Newman, comes in, struggles, has 2 big penalties that, could have set them back and could have really changed the outcome of this game had the offense not responded. I think, without Christian Watson, they have been without him multiple games this year. They know how to get by. Not without him, but they've had guys step up, Mercedes Lewis, etc. Keyshawn Nixon, while there's not going to be the electricity at the return game, they do have Randall Cobb. They tried out Romeo Doubs, which a little dicey there. But I would say long term, again, depending on when David Bakhtiari can come back, it's when you lose Yosh Nijman and you have, Royce in there, it's a little bit of a struggle, and you have to think long term. Are the guys going to be blitzing off that side, trying to take advantage? I think maybe Yosh would be my biggest concern if he cannot come back for a while.
There's something funny about all of this, that the Packers feel like such a different team than they were in week 1 and for much of the season. And yet they may be starting Royce Newman at right tackle, which they did in week 1 because of injuries. They may be without Christian Watson, who was essentially not in the game after the drop on the first play. And Keyshawn Nixon was not on the team, basically. Like, he was a special teams only player. And so it'll essentially be a rematch of week 1 in a lot of ways, and we'll see what the Packers learned. I think my answer is Christian Watson. I think the offense just looks so different when he's out there in blocking, in running, in, his jet motion ability is huge. And then, of course, the way that he attracts attention. I can't believe on that terrible sack Aaron Rodgers took in the red zone. One of the reasons is the guy that the play is designed for, Christian Watson, had 3 Dolphins on him.
3, yeah.
So like that's going to impact your offense a lot if that guy is not out there. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings because they have won a lot of close games. In fact, almost exclusively close games this season. Where do you view them in the NFC in terms of quality? Like most people, maybe you don't think they're as good as their record. I personally don't think that. But where do you think they are on this sort of NFC hierarchy?
You know, I still think they're a very good team. I would say, probably not an 11-2 team, but again, a sign of a good team is being able to win those close games. I think this is still a very potent team. Again, I don't think, Packers have won very close games and,
Yep,
people can say,
they just won one.
Correct. I'm like, they didn't deserve to win that game. The Vikings, you could probably say that for every game the last couple months.
Yes, you could.
But the thing about this Vikings team is they legitimately are not out of it until the clock hits 0 in the fourth.
Yeah.
Like the Pack, they could be down 33 points like we saw, and they could still come back. I don't think that's a sign of a bad team. Yeah, they dug themselves into a hole, but they have found ways to come back and win. I think that's what makes them dangerous, is that you literally cannot count them out until the game is done. I think it's going to be a big challenge, but I still think this is a very good Vikings team that, while their record is very good, I don't think people should say, oh, they're close wins or, they probably got away with one, whatever, they still won. So I think this is a talented team.
At a certain point, it's a math problem, right? Like if they're going to be the 2 seed, it kind of doesn't matter because they're going to get 2 home games. Like that's just how it works out. And that matters in the postseason. Playing at US Bank is very different than playing at Lambeau Field. And for the Packers, like, I don't know, there are some people who are going to say they'd probably rather than play in the Dome anyway. And there are a lot of Packer fans looking forward to a potential 2-7 matchup in this one. What is the matchup that you're going to have your eye on here as we move toward this game? Because I think there are a lot of fun ones. What is the one you're most looking forward to seeing?
I think it's the obvious one, right? Mr. Justin Jefferson and those DBs and Jair. I mean, we saw week 1. We knew he was going to be a problem. Did the Packers stop him? Not at all. And it was questioned after the game. Why don't you have Jair matched up with them? And we had talked about that. I think that is going to be the big question mark is, can this Packers defense defend him? And can they rattle Kirk Cousins? They were not able to do that in week 1. Kirk has not been able to give them any gimme interceptions. They got to get to Kirk. And they got to make his life uncomfortable, and they have to just try to contain Justin Jefferson because, again, the Packers secondary in that first half against the Dolphins was absolutely shredded. So if, the Dolphins are doing that, Kirk Cousins is going to do that with Justin Jefferson yet again. Can't have that happen. That's what I'm looking for.
This is an interesting matchup too, because, I just made the case that Christian Watson was more important to me than Josh Nijman. Maybe not this week. Because you have Zadarius Smith, you have Danielle Hunter. This pass rush has been the best part of this defense by far. Now, they gave up 400 yards of offense to the Giants, and they just can't stop giving up yards. I think the Packers can put up yards with Romeo Doubs and Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb and Samori Toure. I would worry about the pass protection. So if you have Royce Newman out there, that would be a lot worse than if you had Nijman, and certainly than if you had Bakhtiari too. I mean, if you could get both those guys back this week, what a luxury that would be for the Packers. When you were watching on Saturday and everything is breaking right for the Packers, did that affect the way that you felt about the game on Sunday? Did that put more pressure on the team to win, or was it like, okay, now it's all in front of us, we can laser in and do it? Like, how do you as an outsider view that in terms of what your perception was?
Great question. I would say, excuse me. I would say my answer would be, I think all the pressure was on them to win. I think it was opponent dependent. Had the Rams per se coming up on Sunday, I would have said, okay, now everything is in front of them. But they were playing the Dolphins at home, a very explosive offense that hadn't won in 3 weeks. I was thinking, okay, all the pressure is on this team to get a win, because it's not like it's an easy win on the road against a tough opponent. So in my mind, it was all the pressure is on Green Bay to not screw this thing up, because everything is in front of them. They have a tough opponent to play too. So it's not, we're saying everything is great on Christmas Eve, but that's all for naught if they lose, right? So my idea was all the pressure was on, and they answered the bell.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a little bit of both. Like it was adding pressure because now the game has stakes, real stakes, in a way that it might not have if, like everything went the other way. All of a sudden you're just like, oh, now you're really climbing uphill. It's like, oh no, now we have this great opportunity but that opportunity also brings that added pressure. So you get to embrace that moment. And that's what you want as a team. You want to be able to embrace that moment and not wilt under the lights. Speaking of wilting under the lights. Oy, Nathaniel Hackett, not great, Bob. Really not great in Denver. He is no longer going to be the head coach of the Denver Broncos. I have been one of many to suggest a reunion in Green Bay would make some sense. I joked, half joked, that he would be in Green Bay by the time for the playoffs. What do you think of that idea? Is it something that you think is actually workable for the Packers? Maybe not this year, but in the offseason?
I certainly think so. I mean, this Packers, it was all about the gold zone, right? The gold zone, right. The gold zone. The Packers are really good in the red zone with Nathaniel Hackett. This year, it's been very different. They have struggled in the red zone. They struggled mightily against the Dolphins in that area. Doesn't hurt to bring him back. That's, if he wants to come back. I know he's a great relationship with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers and that offense. So I don't think it would hurt to bring him back because, again, when he was in Green Bay, this offense was putting up 30-plus points a game, it seems like. So I don't think it hurts. And it just is, it just really is a bummer that it didn't work out with him. But, when you have a 4-11 start, the team is falling apart. It's just kind of a dumpster fire there in Denver. Time to make a change, but maybe that change includes Nathaniel coming back. So I wouldn't be opposed to it.
All right, let's go back in the time machine for a sec.
Okay.
Let's go back a little over a month. The Packers are 4-8. Feels like rock bottom. At that point, what did you think the chances were that the Packers would be sitting here at 7-8 with a chance to actually make this all happen with 2 games to go?
I thought it would have been slim. I'm very optimistic because it's always like this Packers team always has a chance until they're mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. I was remaining optimistic, but I thought, okay, the Bears game, yeah, that could be a win. But I thought the Rams, this is before Baker Mayfield, the Rams would have been a tough matchup on Monday night. And then, of course, you have the Dolphins on the road. Who knew the Dolphins would have came into that game?
Yeah, they went 0 for December.
I mean, they were on fire last month. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, that's 2 automatic losses, or at least 1 automatic loss on the road on Christmas Day. And then you're kind of really behind the 8 ball there. Again, didn't really feel optimistic. I think there was a tinge of optimism, but I was like, how are they going to be able to pull this thing off? And they certainly have. So I would say a month ago, I'm doing now like a 180, 360 in my view.
I think that's fair. I was not optimistic about it either. And I kept saying, like, yes, they can do it. We know they have the talent to do it, but how can I predict that they will do it? That would be craziness. I think it would have been madness to predict it happening, but now here we are. Now, I think it would have been extra crazy to predict, yes, they'd win the last 5, go 9-8, but they're more than halfway there now. They just have to beat these 2 teams. They're 3.5-point favorites, which means that the odds makers think that they are actually a better team than Minnesota, or at least will be a better team in this game because Minnesota said, if guys are hurt, like we kind of don't care about this. Like we're going to rest people. The only thing, and people get mad about me asking you this question, and that's fine. They can get mad if they want. Is any part of you a little disappointed we're not going to get to see Jordan Love?
Yes. I think because we got a taste of it, right? We got a tiny taste of Jordan Love, and he played well. And you're thinking, whenever Aaron Rodgers, his time in Green Bay is done, whenever that is, this potentially or should be our future quarterback. And so I think a lot of people were kind of just expecting that the season was just going to be done. They would lose out or win one of the last 5 games or whatnot. And then we would see Jordan Love these next 2 weeks. I would say if you were to give Packers fans that option versus, hey, they're fighting for their playoff lives, maybe more would go the latter. But I certainly, would have liked to see more Jordan Love. And I know for him, it's, he's a team player, but I'm sure he wants to get out there. Hey, maybe there's a blowout game, Peter, and they're blowing teams out, and then we see him.
That'd be great.
I would have liked to see him, but I'm okay with where they're at now, where, they're fighting for.
Right. To be clear, my preference is this.
Yes.
Winning the games is always my preference. Not just from like following the team, but from like doing a show. I'd much rather come on here and talk about wins. It is much more fun for me to talk about wins, and to be in a playoff race and have an engaged fan base. I don't want to be talking about the draft in December. That sucks. And so I'm glad that they're here, but I do think there's a little tinge of like, God, it just would have been fun to see. Like I had my father-in-law say that to me after they won. He's like, well, I guess we're not going to see Jordan Love this year. And it just, it's just something that because we were talking a lot about it. So hopefully the only way that we see Jordan Love this week is if the Packers are up like 35-13 in the fourth quarter. And then, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Packers, I don't believe, well, no, there is a scenario where they can be eliminated this week, but they can lose and still not be eliminated because of 16 different things that can happen for them. So we'll see. We'll see where we are next week when we talk again. Lily Zhao, I appreciate your time. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right. Thanks to Lily Zhao for joining us on the show today. Always great to talk to her. And as I mentioned, the Packers got some good news on the injury front, at least as Aaron Rodgers is telling it. Keyshawn Nixon, David Bakhtiari have a chance to play. Matt LaFleur said Christian Watson's day-to-day, as we mentioned on the show yesterday. Yosh Nijman, day-to-day. So we'll see. This is a huge game for Green Bay. You have to believe that all those guys are going to push hard to play. It is an all-hands-on-deck moment. This episode brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find an episode of The League available as a bonus episode on Locked On NFL, narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster Taylor Rooks. She is awesome. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories that connect to America's favorite sport. That is, of course, pro football. On our bonus episode, it's called The Way of the Cowboy and is the incredible story of how the 1977 Dallas Cowboys brought in Bruce Lee's protege to teach their defense martial arts, ushering in a new approach to the way the league trained. Each story offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary. Head over to Locked On NFL for the bonus episode of The League, or catch the full series wherever you get your podcast. Available now. Audible. Get in the game. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now make Locked On Sports today your second listen. I bring you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports today. Available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. All right, we're going to be back tomorrow, our crossover Thursday. Then we have a special treat on our Friday show. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live, like we will be after the game on Sunday, 3:30 Central Time, nationally televised Packers Vikings. You can do that by checking us out on the Locked On Packers YouTube page to stay Locked On Packers.